Shabbat Shalom. It's a robust Shabbat Shalom. Sometimes it's a weak one. Tonight, people really need Shabbat. In 1751, the Speaker of the Pennsylvania Assembly, Isaac Norris, chose this inscription for the State House bell, possibly to commemorate the 50th anniversary of William Penn's 1701 Charter of Privileges, which granted religious liberties and political self-government to the people of Pennsylvania. The inscription on the Liberty bell, of course, is the famous pasuk that appears in this week's parasha, Ukaratem dror ba'aretz l'chol yoshveha, proclaim liberty throughout the land to all the inhabitants thereof. The inscription on the Liberty Bell went unnoticed during this Revolutionary War, and after the war, of course, which is I think how we think about it, abolitionists seeking to end slavery in America were inspired by the bell's message. But it wasn't actually built for that purpose. That's not what the choice of the verse had in mind, Isaac Norris had in mind when he chose that pasuk to put on the Liberty Bell. There are a number of peculiarities about this verse, Ukaratem dror ba'aretz l'chol yoshveha, that the commentators focus on. And what I'd like to focus on in the pasuk is the fact that it says, l'chol yoshveha. You shall proclaim liberty throughout the land to all the inhabitants. And the Pnei Yehoshua was an 18th century German Polish rabbi, asked the question, why does it say l'chol yoshveha? Why does it say to all the inhabitants of the land when, of course, the verse would be directed at the people who are not free, meaning the slaves? The pasuk, by the way, comes in the course of the Jubilee year, the Yovel, which is the 50th year when everything is supposed to return to its original state, and all slaves are set free. It's a building on from Shabbat to the sabbatical year, and then the culmination, of course, is the Yovel, the Jubilee year. So he asks, why does it say to all the inhabitants rather than all the slaves, which it could have said? And his answer is the following: because in any country where freedom is incomplete, even if this is the case with only some of the people, all people are enslaved. When any country where freedom is incomplete, even if this is the case with only some of the people, all the people are enslaved. One only feels freedom when there is no slavery whatsoever in a country. Slavery is an affliction which afflicts both the slave and the master. It's a searing commentary, and one which in theory I think we know to be true, but in reality I think we always think there's a hierarchy of those who are privileged and those who are not. Or in our country we think about the history of slavery, or we can apply this framework to lots of places all throughout the world. The occupied, the occupier, slave, master. And the question I think he is pointing to is the fact that the lack of freedom or the ownership of people or the dominance of one over another is actually an identity that everyone embodies. No one is free without that identity and without that essence if a sense of freedom is not true for all. It has impact on everyone, whether we realize it or not. We walk in the world differently because of that. We treat people differently because of that. We have an internal soul that's different because we're living in a society where not all are free. And I think we think often, particularly in the Upper West Side of Manhattan, in this beautiful space that we have, that we're so lucky and blessed, and many of us are. It's true. But the impact of the hierarchies that exist in the world in all their forms has an indelible impact on the soul. And part of what Shabbat comes to teach us is to take notice of that indelible imprint. Because Shabbat is the baseline for that notion of Jubilee. It's Shabbat, the seventh day, where we're supposed to release ourselves of those hierarchies, to not have ownership, to not control, to not spend money, to stop using our phones, to stop working, is to taste the feeling of what it means to be in a non-hierarchical structure, and to let the soul be free in all the ways it gets to live openly and generously and lovingly and less judgmental. And so we taste that every Friday night, beginning at the sundown. You can always bring in Shabbat a little early now that the sun goes down so late. Towards building up towards, of course, the sabbatical year and then the Jubilee. But the question is how are we holding that sense of what it means to live in a world that is not that way? So as we welcome in Shabbat on the Shabbat Bahar, in a world that is so completely broken, so filled with dominance and victims and pain to abound, and everyone's arguing over who has it worse, perhaps we might want to think about what it means to live in such a society that puts people in so many boxes and hierarchies that we forget what it truly means to be free and what it is we're striving for, which is not to win, but to live in freedom, in love, in peace, in justice, and in dignity. And if for 25 hours a week we could just taste that a little bit more and hunger for that just a little bit more, maybe something could change. So may it be.